Hey everybody, I'm Curtis.
And I'm Hannah.
And this is Love at First Fright. So what have you been up to?
Pretty much looking at it. I've been an indoor gal.
Yeah.
I've been sitting right here in this office chair a lot. And then when I'm not sitting in this office chair, I'm sitting on my couch.
Yep.
Watching TV and reading and stuff.
Yeah. We've watched more reality TV.
Yep.
Because I think we have a problem.
It's just been it's a good time. You know?
It's a good time to not do anything.
It's a good time to not do anything, and what better way to not do anything than to watch other people
not do anything?
No, do everything.
Oh, do other things.
Yeah.
Do things that we could do, but we're not going to.
But we're not going to do it. We're just
fair.
going to watch them do it.
I mean, I'm not going to go on Love is Blind.
No, me
So
either.
I don't have any...
we're in a relationship. So.
Yeah. That's true. That doesn't seem to stop some of the people.
Oh, Jeremy, you are on our shit list. I know you listen to the podcast.
No, I haven't really been doing much of anything lately either. I've been really busy with school.
Yeah.
I had midterms recently, and other than that, I've either been working, playing D&D, or running D&D. Yep. Actually, I have to run it right after this.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I mean, I really haven't been doing too much. It's also been really rainy here recently.
It has been
it's kind of been like a little bit of a downer.
I guess it's the wet season. I don't know.
The wet season.
Yeah.
Is that the technical term?
Yeah. They use it in the business. It's rainy season, wet season, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, maybe we'll get wet and wild next week. Who knows?
You mean by going? I'm not going out in the rain intentionally.
Get weird.
No, that's not even weird. I mean, it's just you're just gonna be wet.
Yeah,
you'll just be standing out there and be like, "Well, I did that," and then go back inside.
Well, at least I'd be living.
Sure, man. Anyway.
It was exciting, however, to watch this movie this week.
Yeah, we didn't do anything, but this movie did everything.
Yes, everything.
We watched, as we told you at the end of the last episode, we watched Cabin in the Woods.
Cabin in the Woods.
This movie is really, really fun, really, really good. I have a very fond memory of watching this at a friend's house during a sleepover.
Nice.
And we didn't see the twists and turns coming in this because, I think at the time in particular, like, how could you?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So... whenever this movie comes up again, that's kind of where my head goes is back to then. Also, I want to say really quickly, I don't know if it's going to come through on this recording or not, but I feel like it's my responsibility to put this out there. So the way we have this set up is in our like office / recording / junk room.
Yes. 80% junk.
It's mostly junk.
Everything else.
Yeah. I also have a pet tortoise. Her name is Steve, and I fed her just before we started this recording, and because she started making some noise in the tank. So you may hear some crunching noises, or just like it's gonna sound like kind of like somebody scraping up against glass. We didn't hire a scare actor. That's just Steve with perfect comedic timing if she decides to do it.
She's a big fan of digging in a corner.
Yes,
that's
she loves doing it.
95% of what she gets up to.
Yeah.
So
she's just crunching.
I can hear it, and I'm facing her, so I'm just like watching her absolutely decimate.
Well,
this
it's like
kale.
on occasion I'm getting like I'll say something, and then I'll just hear out of from the side this little crunch. crotch. And I'm like, okay. Anyway.
But, and it's funny that you bring that up about your first experience with it, because I was weirdly kind of late to the Cabin in the Woods party. I had seen it before we just watched it, but I didn't see it until much later after it had come out. And I had already, I didn't necessarily have like a bunch of spoilers, but I knew that it was a situation where it was like this very like meta thing. And so that was kind of spoiled for me just because of when I, watched it for the first time. But it doesn't take away from it. Like, my first experience watching it, even knowing that, I was still just having a blast watching it.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's one of those movies that, and we can kind of talk about it specifically when we get to these moments.
Sure.
I think it's one of those movies that you watch it the first time unseen, maybe you don't know anything about it like I did.
Right.
And you get something out of it. It's a fun ride. It is a horror movie, but it's definitely a comedy.
It's a horror comedy.
And I think it plays both of those parts really well. It's I think it leans more comedy than it does horror, but the horror stuff that's in it is good.
Yes.
But anyway, you get what you get out of that, and I think it's perfectly fine. It's fun. If you never watch it again, that's great. However, I think it's one of those movies that if you watch it again, you actually get a lot more out of it.
Yes.
It's one of those movies for me that every time I have watched it, and it's not like I've watched it hundreds of times or anything, but every time I have watched it, it's thousands. It's the best movie ever made.
I watch it every
Tens
day.
across the board. That I notice or pick up on new things.
Definitely.
And I think it's because it's one of those movies that is like a meta discussion of horror, and it's tropes the movie, but less scary than Scream being also kind of tropes the movie.
Because it definitely leans more into the comedy for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess we can kind of go into some of the basics. This came out in 2011.
Graduation year. That's when I got out of
high school.
I
was a junior, I think, if that math works.
I don't know. Don't ask me to do
I was
math.
I don't know. I'm 2 years younger.
You were in school.
I was in school too. But yes, 2011. It was directed by Drew Goddard, who he also did like Cloverfield, or he wrote Cloverfield. He wrote the screenplay for World War Z. So he's been in things.
It's weird. I've never seen Cloverfield. I have seen World War Z.
Okay. But it was co-written by him and also Joss Whedon of Buffy the Vampire Slayer fame. Drew Goddard actually worked on Buffy and Angel and stuff as well. They've had like a long-standing
didn't know that
career together. But yeah, this was a movie that the two of them wrote together that was specifically supposed to be a horror movie about horror movies. I think I don't remember which one of them it was, but one of them was quoted as saying that it was a loving hate letter to horror because it was kind of simultaneously a send up to all the tropes that we know and love, but also a criticism of how like formulaic the genre has gotten, and just like different things as well. So it was co-written by them, directed by Goddard, and starring a pretty good cast, actually. There's Chris Hemsworth famously was in this movie, and this came out like just a few months before the first Thor movie did, so it was like no one even knew he was going to become this mega star that he turned out to be. But yeah, Chris Hemsworth is playing a character named Kurt, not to be confused with Curtis, the host of Love at First Fright. Yeah, it's really easy to make that swap, but he's a different
if you want to
character.
Pretend that that's me in the movie, I guess that's fine.
Yeah, you can just sort of slot him in there.
I don't want to like die though, so maybe not.
Okay, well, yeah, so Chris Hemsworth as Kurt, and then we have Kristen Connolly playing, who's probably more the main character, Dana. And then you have Fran Kranz, who is playing Marty. Probably like the second most important character, I would say.
Yeah, the way everything shakes out, yeah.
And then Anna Hutchison is playing Jules, who is Kurt's girlfriend in the film. And then you have Jesse Williams, who is playing a character named Holden. And also worth noting, those are the main characters, kind of our teens that we're following. But this movie also stars Richard Jenkins, who's playing the character Sitterson, and then Bradley Whitford, who's playing the character Hadley in their, in their own thing. But good cast and a really, really fun movie. And I honestly think people gave great performances, and I think they really because every character is kind of, associated with an archetype in the film, and they really play that. It's
when I say tropes of the movie, I don't mean any hate at all towards it. Everyone plays an archetype character, and they lean really heavily into that with the acting choices and the dialogue that is in the movie. It's also fun because throughout the movie we get explanations as to why the characters are doing the things that they're doing. It's not just let's make Kurt the stupid jock guy just because we need to have one. It's a fun kind of mystery to solve as to why he is doing that.
Right. So in case anyone hasn't seen the movie, the basic prompt of it is that this group of 5 friends, they're college students, and they're is it spring break that they're
I don't know. I don't know if they actually say what it is. Yeah, basically, they're all in college and they're going on a trip.
Yeah, so they're going to Kurt's cousin's cabin in the woods.
Yes. They said the name of the thing in the thing.
Yes. And, they're just going to spend the weekend together. So you have obviously Kurt and Jules, who are kind of this it couple. He plays some kind of sports, but I can't remember which it is. Is it football?
I think it's football.
But they also remark that he's a sociology major, and he's smart, and he's not just a meathead, and then you have Jules, who's his girlfriend, who's hot and fun and all that stuff, but she's also a good student and kind and all of those things.
And she has just dyed her hair blonde.
She has just dyed her hair blonde, yes, which is important. But her bestie is Dana, who's kind of this, shy, bookish, girl. And their friend Marty, who's this, he's very smart, but he's a big stoner guy, He literally talks like Shaggy from Scooby-Doo the whole time.
He's if the Scooby-Doo movies were made for adults.
For adults, yeah. So they have him, and then they also have Holden, who is Kurt's friend, and Kurt and Jules have they're trying to set Holden and Dana up. So there's sort of this possible romance.
Yeah, the context being that Dana had a relationship with a professor.
Yes.
In college, and the professor, I guess, just broke it off.
Yeah.
Just before the movie starts, basically.
Right. So they're trying to, have a good time, have a good break as these college students. But then, of course, because it's a horror movie, stuff gets weird at the cabin, and then stuff gets even weirder somehow. And I know we've already kind of made some references to it, but massive spoiler alert. If somehow you've made it this far and you don't know what the twist is in this movie and you still want to watch it.
The movie's 13 years old?
Hit pause now.
Yeah.
Go watch it and then come back.
Yeah.
But the, big twist of it is that they have unknowingly been lured into this, basically this trap, this scenario where a group is trying to manipulate the events to kill all of them, or at least 4 out of the 5 of them, in this ritualistic manner, because there are evil gods underneath the ground that demand a blood sacrifice.
It's one of those things where the ultimate why is it doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter. By the end of the movie, the only thing we ever see of these evil gods is as a hand. Yeah. And that's it. We don't really know, and we don't really need to know or care about it. The long and short of it is it's a ritualistic sacrifice that maybe not every country, but most countries in the world participate in this.
Yes.
And I think only one of them needs to be successful.
And I think that's the thing, is that only one group has to do it, but these other countries also participate as like a safety net.
Yeah, it's a safety net. So that this way, if one doesn't do it, then somewhere else will. It's kind of a joke during the whole thing. The opening sequence is in this like facility.
Yes.
And with these and
it's the two technician guys who are Sitterson and Hadley that I mentioned earlier. They are kind of like the man in the chair that's, manipulating all these situations. They're, they're adjusting the lighting, and they're, adding a smell and release the pheromones, and, like they are the orchestrators of all of this.
But then it's fun because like the department they're like one department in it, but there's also like a chemistry department, and then there's like electricians and like tech side of it and everything,
engineers,
and so like they all have to like work together
and
in it.
It kind of comes across a little bit as like a workplace comedy when you're in those scenes, because obviously we know like what they're doing is horrifying and awful to like just kill these people, but they're being so like laissez-faire. This is just this is a Tuesday for them, so they're taking bets about what's gonna happen.
Some of the best scenes in the movie are like we're cutting from some horrific thing happening at the cabin to they're literally throwing a party in the beer, control room celebrating that the ritual's gone off. And it's just really funny, the stark difference that you get with like, and the whole time on this big monitor in the background somebody's actively being like murdered. It's so funny.
So that obviously is what is happening. And of course, our core group of characters, they don't know that at first. Right. They know that they're in an increasingly dangerous situation, but they don't know that it's being manipulated behind the scenes, and that there's puppeteers, as they call them.
Marty. Puppeteer.
But as their numbers dwindle down, they do eventually learn the truth and everything leading up to the final confrontation. But that's why I think it's such a fun movie, is that the concept is just really fun.
I think it's great because they have a strong concept, but they also like follow through with it, right? They don't kind of throw it away. I don't know, like you get these like found footage movies, for example, right? When like the premise of it is we're going to go into this abandoned asylum because of historical reasons, but then like there's demons or something in there. And then like we kind of talked about it in the Wreck thing, where like at a certain point it doesn't make sense that just that they're filming it. Or one question you always ask about found footage movies is how did we even find the footage? How did we get it? Usually the spirits have somehow distributed this thing, whatever. Anyway,
it doesn't really matter.
But like a lot of the times you feel like in these horror movies, they kind of throw away everything just to like keep showing you the movie, and it kind of loses out on some of it.
Or they have a fun hook, but then they don't have the they don't have the execution to really follow through with the idea. That's something, and I know it's very easy for me to say, watching it on the couch or whatever, but there are a lot of times where I watch horror movies that end up being kind of mid, and I'm like, if you had given me this story concept and let me write the rest of this, it would be so much better, because what the hell was that? And
no, I think that's totally fair.
They really they delivered on the vision. They had a vision, and they did not come to play.
If you've ever seen Scream, but you haven't seen this movie, then just kind of imagine like how Scream discusses horror, and especially like past the first movie. I think they start getting into like more meta discussions of it. Imagine that, but kind of dialed up to 11, especially where like the trope aspects of horror come in, and less so the like actual construction of a horror movie. What I mean is like fairly early on in the movie, they all get into the Rambler, the RV, and they go and they find on the way there a gas station. And of course we get the creepy gas station attendant who basically tells them, don't go up there.
Right.
And they choose to go up there. And that's an important part of this ritual, is that like, it's not the people who are organizing it and orchestrating it, they're not forcing them to go do this.
Right.
They're just kind of rigging it as much as they need to.
Right.
Stopping short of, making them go and do this. They always have the choice of whether or not they want to go.
That's an important part of it, is that they have to
willingly go and do this. So they choose after meeting the creepy gas station attendant to go do this. And then once they're there, Jules and Kurt both kind of devolve into these stereotype characters of Kurt as this big meathead.
Yeah, he's getting all like macho.
Alpha male style.
Yeah.
And then...
and Jules is being like hypersexual, where she's like, dancing and like getting all sexy, even with like people who aren't her boyfriend.
Yeah, and then even Holden, right? Like we know he's kind of scholarly, that he's kind of smart, but then partway through when they're at the cabin, he pulls out glasses and he puts them on. But then after that, he's basically always wearing them because he's like falling more and more into that stereotype. And even Marty is like playing into the role of what they call the fool in this, because he's just smoking all of the time. Right. And then I guess she's supposed to be the virgin. So Dana is the virgin. Kurt is the athlete. Yes. Jules is the whore. Marty is the fool, and Holden is the scholar. Yes, those are their roles. Yes, and the rules of this whole thing is that everyone has to die. The whore has to die first. Yes. And then I don't think it matters the order in between the whore and the virgin, but the virgin's death is optional. Yes. That one's left up to fate. Everyone else has to die before she does. Before her, yeah. And so a lot of this is just orchestrating, making sure that they all die while she kind of lives for as long as necessary. Right. Yeah, and it's interesting, too, to see, like, obviously they each play their own role, and the longer that they're in the cabin, they kind of take on more of that. But you also see the direct manipulation of the things that are happening behind the scenes. Like, one of my favorite moments is it's after Jules has been killed, and Kurt returns to the cabin, and he's immediately like, we all have to stick together no matter what. Yeah. And then he turns to go down the hallway, and you can see that they like release this little like perfume spray of some kind of thing that he inhales. And then he turns around and he goes, this isn't right. We should split up, because then we'll cover more ground that way. And then Holden is just like, yeah, he's right. We should. And it's like, okay. And Marty's in the background, and he's like, what? Yes. And Marty is kind of, it's funny because he's such a funny character in the movie, and he has some of the funniest lines and the best moments, but he's also weirdly kind of the straight man of this all, because everyone else is making these absolutely ludicrous decisions, and he's like, are we sure? Like, to me, the best line in the movie is Marty's, and it's when before everything happens and they are down in the basement. And again, because they have to be willing participants in this, there's all these different like artifacts in the basement. So the group essentially chooses what scenario they're going to play depending on what object in the basement they interact with. Yeah. And they end up picking the book that leads to the zombie redneck family or whatever it is. Yeah. It's zombie redneck torture family, yes, I think is what it is. That's it. But which is distinctly different from zombies. Yes. It's an entirely different species. Different yeah, but my favorite line is as they're reading this journal that's going to initiate that scenario for them, and Dana is like, and there's some Latin. And Marty just walks up and he goes, no, now I'm drawing a fucking line in the sand. Do not read the Latin. And it's like, thank you. Yeah, no, Marty plays the perfect, like, audience surrogate of, like, when you are watching a horror movie and you're like, don't go in the basement. And then when they do it, you're like, don't open the weird book. And then they do it. And you're like, don't read the weird, passage in a foreign language or, like, demonic tongue that you don't know what it is or whatever. Just don't do it. And then, of course, they do it. Yes. And, it's not just that scene. Like, throughout the movie, Marty is kind of just, like, his role is the fool, but you learn this kind of towards the climax of the
Towards the
movie,
end, yeah.
that he kind of pieced the whole thing together. He obviously couldn't have like foreseen how everything was going to shake out,
Right.
and so he didn't know all of the ending, but like he definitely he put together that there were puppeteers,
Right.
and that they were being manipulated,
Right.
and everything, and
well, and part of the reason that this happened was because they had, I guess, whatever chemical they were going to use to influence him, they had put it in his like weed supply, but he had weed, I guess, that was physically on him that they didn't have a chance to manipulate, and that was his stash that he was smoking throughout this night. And so he wasn't being affected
by whatever.
Yeah, like everybody else was being influenced. Like we learn later on that they had like laced Jules's hair dye, and you know, she just dyed her hair blonde
to make her the dumb blonde.
Yes. And you know, Kurt obviously has all this like meathead stuff with these like pheromones that they're pumping in to make him all alpha male and everything. But Marty has managed to avoid that fate by not getting like exposed in the way that was intended. So he's observing all of this weirdly with like the clearest head, even though he's stoned out of his mind the whole time. But
there's a really fun like kind of like he thinks he's so stoned that like clearly he has to be making this stuff up in his own head, but like we as the audience are like, no, he's got it. There's a scene where he's in his bedroom in the cabin reading a picture book, and he hears this like kind of ghostly disembodied voice,
go for a walk,
and he's like, what the hell is that? And then it happens again, and he like freaks out, and he's like, you think you can control me? I'm the only one who's the master of my mind. I'm gonna go for a walk.
And then he
goes outside.
Yeah.
So like he is like immune to whatever the chemical is, but like he clearly is still
he's still stoned.
Yeah, he's still stoned. And it's just really fun to watch. The only ones I think they don't really get into that like about like how they're really being manipulated is Holden.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
And Dana. Like they don't really explain how
Dana honestly doesn't really seem to be affected either, and I think that's intentional so that her wits are about her so that she can survive the experience.
Because that one is supposed to be up to fate, so I think they intentionally, like you said, don't really mess with her that much.
I don't know what they did to Holden. That may have just been something I've missed, or it might be a little more vague. I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's also, again, not super important.
It isn't, and it really doesn't have that big of an impact on him. Like, it's not making him make decisions he wouldn't normally make necessarily. Like he's just becoming like a more heightened version of his, you know, trope. Oh yeah, something that I wanted to say, because I have like a little fun fact here.
Okay.
So in the beginning of the film, you might remember when we first meet Marty, he has that giant bong.
Yeah, it's the retractable thermos bong.
Yes. So like it goes back down into like a regular like travel coffee mug.
Yeah.
But they like wanted this to work in the movie, so they actually like spent a lot of time like making a fully functional bong and retractable like thermos thing, and it cost them over $5,000 to make the prototype. And apparently there were companies like after the movie came out and it was so successful who wanted to make that as a product that like a fan could buy.
Yeah.
But it was so like you would never make money off of
it
because it would be thousands of dollars to make.
Yeah.
But yeah, they had a whole team that was working on the bong situation,
funny.
which is just delightful. Oh, actually, another fun piece of trivia that I have related to Marty is that the character, or not the character, the actor playing the character, I forget what movie it was that he was working on, but he was working on another project around the same time where he had to be like really buff. And so he was actually in like amazingly good shape in that movie. And it's why Marty is the only person who's like always wearing clothes. Like, he doesn't swim in the lake scene, and like he never takes off like his cardigan and like different stuff. And it's because he was so ripped that it would have looked weird to have this like stoner guy who's more buff than Chris Hemsworth, who's playing the athlete.
That's funny as hell. I did not notice that. I mean, I clocked when they're at the cabin when they first get there, and I think Jules yells something about like, get your suits on, we're we're hitting the lake in like 10 minutes, and you actually hear a line from Marty being like, I wasn't aware that we were going to be doing that, which is really funny to think about, because like part of the whole thing about them going to the cabin was that there was going to be
There's a lake,
so anyway.
But it was just because he was so ripped at the time.
Very funny. One of my favorite things about this movie is the kind of foreshadowing of things that they continuously do that ends up paying off later. The first thing that we get, and this kind of explains what the end result of the movie will actually be. And this is what I mean by, if you watch it a second time, you actually get a little bit more out of it.
Right.
Because when when Marty first shows up, as they're all kind of getting together to get ready to leave for the trip, they're talking to him about, do you just have a bong sitting in your car? And he goes off on this whole tangent about like the police fear the man who
has the giant bong.
Who has the giant bong. And it's very funny. But he ends up saying by the end of this like monologue about it that maybe humanity should crumble.
Right. And
somebody else should get like another try. And by the end of the movie, that's like basically the choice that ends up getting made. And it's sprinkled all throughout. When they first get, like just before they get to the cabin, there's a tunnel that they have to drive through, and we get this shot as they go into the tunnel, and then like this like hawk is flying, and then as it's flying, it just slams into this invisible force field and just like dies. And then the RV comes out of the other side of the tunnel, so they don't see that this force field is there, and it's the only way and it's the only way in and out. And that force field comes back later. There's running jokes throughout the whole thing about like monsters and stuff that we eventually do get to see, like that scene in the basement where they have to pick all the between all the artifacts. We actually get to see what is attached to the object, and some of them are really obvious references. There's a puzzle ball that is that Kurt starts to solve.
It's Pinhead.
It's Pinhead. You get to see the thing later holding the puzzle ball, and he's got like a saw blade sticking out of his head and everything. And it's just the Cenobites from Hellraiser. There's this whole thing with mermen. Yes. And Kurt's about to blow on a conch shell, and there's like a whole running thing about mermen through the whole thing.
That's one of my favorite like setup things that they deliver on later, is that because the group, whoever this group is that does all this, they have, this betting pool of what monster the group is going to end up summoning. And Hadley, who's one of the technicians, he bets all his money on Merman, and they don't pick that, and he has kind of this like sad moment of like, I just think Merman would have been cool, and then when he eventually dies at the end of the film, it is this very drawn out scene of him on the ground and this gross wet merman it's just like army crawling like towards
a pig
him.
Snout for a blowhole on its back.
It's awful.
It's horrendous looking.
And it does kill him.
His final line is, come on! And it jumps on him and just starts tearing him apart.
And it's just
blowing
really
blood
fun.
out of the blowhole. It's so funny and
fun.
Such a good payoff, because it's a thing that they just sprinkle through. And you don't think it's going to be a payoff, but then it does, and man, it's worth it. Yeah. It really is.
I know, I'm getting annoying. I have another piece of
No,
trivia.
I like the fun facts. Just throw them at me.
In that scene when that elevator wide shot where it zooms out and we see all the different monsters, there's kind of a little Easter egg in there, because when this movie came out, prior to it coming out, the production company had made a deal with the video game Left 4 Dead, and they were gonna do a Cabin in the Woods like tie-in DLC for Left 4 Dead, but that ended up not coming to fruition. But because they were setting that up, there are 4 of the like infected monsters from Left 4 Dead, the video game, in those cubes and elevators.
Yeah, it's funny because like when they do that whole shot, I started looking around to see, but I didn't see.
I mean, there's so many. It's like you'd have to know where they are.
The one that always stands out to me is the little. It's like just a murder robot.
Yes,
this
the murder
is bright
robot.
yellow murder robot that just has like arms and legs and like a buzzsaw sticking off of it. It's so absurd.
The one that gets me, because it's so simple, but it would actually be my worst nightmare, is the giant centipede or millipede.
Oh,
or whatever
yeah,
it is.
you see
I'm
the
just
one
like,
in there.
If that came out when I'm in this situation, we're done.
Yeah.
We're done. I'm giving up.
Yeah.
I can't. Actually, it might make me fight for my life because I would be so scared. But yeah, that would be truly the worst outcome for me possible, as any kind of bug.
Yeah. This movie doesn't really waste a lot of time. I don't know what the full runtime is on the movie.
It's pretty short.
But it's pretty short, so they get into it pretty quickly. You don't feel the runtime on it.
It's an hour and 35 minutes.
Oh yeah, it's great. It's perfect.
Tight 90-minute movie.
Yeah.
Love them.
But like they kind of get into the horror part of it, you know, pretty quick there once the redneck torture zombie family, whatever, is summoned. It all kind of like pops off really quickly. Kurt and Jules go out into the woods so they can hook up, and then that's when Jules gets killed because she has to die first.
Yeah,
they decapitate her. We don't actually.
It's honestly really brutal.
we don't actually see her get decapitated, but it is one of those things where you get just enough of it that it's like, ugh.
Well, and then later on when the guy like comes back to the cabin where they're all hiding out, the door is open at one point and he tosses Jules' head to Dana, which is just like
because Dana wants to go outside because Kurt comes back and he's like covered in blood, and she opens the door to try to go outside to go get Jules, and the big zombie guy standing there holding the head and he just throws it at her. It's a real awful. Gross out scene, but yeah, we get that. Marty gets taken. It's kind of a fake out kill. Yes. Because it's implied that he dies. He's, taken off screen and you can hear the stabbing and the blood and the and all that stuff. Yeah. And the group, the puppeteers, for lack of a better word, they assume that he's dead. They treat the situation as if he's dead, but actually we find out later that he's not. But then after Marty gets got initially, Holden, Kurt, and Dana all escape from the cabin, and then they try to leave through the tunnel, which was supposed to get blown up by explosives but didn't. And they do this like really fun sequence where like you're rooting for the people in the RV to get away, but you're also rooting for the technician Sitterson to make it to where electrical is and fix this little wire thing to get it blown up so that the tunnel will blow and then they can't escape. And so you get in this real juxtaposition. You're like, wait, who should win here? Right. Kind of a thing. And so the tunnel does get blown. They have to reverse. And then probably the most iconic death in the movie comes up after this because Kurt decides he's going to jump the gap between where they are to the other side with his dirt bike that he's brought, which is always funny to me that he even brought the dirt bike to this, because like I don't know how long they're planning on being there. It's like a weekend maybe. And I'm just like, he's just gonna go dirt biking by himself out in the woods. Yeah, he doesn't even have a second one. Yeah. Anyway, so he gets the dirt bike and he goes to do this, and then this is the big payoff for the force field thing. He jumps and it's this big majestic thing, and you think he's gonna make it, and then he just slams. The bike explodes. His body hits the thing. He just starts ragdolling. And then they just keep pinging his body off of the force field as it falls down into the ravine. And it goes so far down. Yeah, it's honestly like kind of painful to watch because you're just like, ooh. Yeah. Ooh. So then it's just Holden and Dana, and they get into the RV, and they set up before this before they even drove into the tunnel. When the door closes, there's like a bloody handprint on the door. That's gonna so it's like back. Something's going on. And as they're driving, Holden's like, you gotta stick with me on this, and we'll just drive until we run out of gas, and then we'll get on foot, and we're just gonna keep going and going. They can't possibly, chase us forever, kind of a thing. And as he's explaining this, he gets stabbed through the neck with this blade.
Through the, car seat
to
or
the
whatever.
headrest or whatever, and then the whole RV shoots off into the water.
Yep.
And then Dana is now the only survivor, that they've really presented to us. So this is the scene that we talked about earlier where everyone's partying.
Yeah, because they think they've done it. So now, like, the people who won the bet are, like, all happy, and they're cheersing, and they're drinking, and, they're doing all this stuff. And literally the whole time you see on the giant screen at the party Dana, who's fighting for her life as she has... swam back to the surface from this car and then still run into another one of these zombies, and she's fighting on this dock
like
and
throwing
getting
her
thrown
around
and choked and just like horrible stuff, and everyone's just literally partying.
Having a great time kind of a thing. And then that's when they get a phone call on this like red phone on the wall, and they're like, we don't hear the conversation in full, we only hear Hadley's part of it. And it's implied that he's like, no, that doesn't make any sense. We saw it. And then, he's like, no, I'm not doubting you. Right. Kind of a thing. That's when we learn something's gone wrong with the ritual. They thought she was the last one alive, but she's not. And just as she's about to get killed, the retractable bong comes in out. And catches the dude has this bear trap like on a chain that he's been throwing at people.
Also, isn't that just like the most impractical weapon you can
It's like
think
an
of?
insane thing to do. I don't know why.
It would be impossible to get anything done with that.
It would probably just be closed the whole time, and you just be hitting people with like a blunt object.
Would just
You're not going to be hitting them with the spikes.
You'd be using it as a flail.
The whole point is that they have like they get set off really easy so they can snap closed. So you're not throwing it through the air. Anyway, but he's going to do that to, kill Dana and like one last thing. And then as he, tosses it backwards and gets ready to throw it, the bong comes up and it gets wrapped around it.
Stupid.
It's so dumb.
So stupid.
And then, Dana gets a piece of wood and knocks him into the water. And then Marty and Dana are running off, and we find out that he's fully Marty has fully dismembered the zombie that like came after him to kill him.
Right.
And
because we have seen repeatedly that they can be like hurt and like temporarily stunned, but they can't die.
Yes.
So like they've tried, they've stabbed, and they've, hit whatever. So he's had to fully take apart. He's just like a pile of goo, but he is still like moving around and stuff.
My favorite line comes up shortly after this. So he pulls Dana into this like grave looking thing, or like some kind of underground thing under a wooden hatch. And he goes in there, and it's like a concrete room, and there's an electrical panel, and he's dismembered this zombie. And he explains that like there's an elevator in there, but there's no panel inside of there, but there's override access here, so he thinks he can get it to go down, which is like the only direction they can really go at this point. So they get in the box, and it goes to go down, and the zombie arm, I guess, falls on him, and he's like, stupid zombie arm. But as they're doing this, obviously everyone in the facility is freaking out, because if the ritual is not completed by the break of day or dawn, then the ritual fails and the evil gods come back to the earth and all of humanity's wiped out, whatever. In the background, by the way, we were kind of like competing, quote unquote, with Japan, and their ritual also failed. They didn't even have any fatalities, according to every other country has failed, so it's down to the US to complete this.
They're desperate at this point, because normally, you would hope somebody else succeeded, so we can just call this a wash and it was a failure and whatever. But they have no choice at this point but to see this through, because as far as what they're presenting us, it would literally be the end of humanity, end of the world, if they don't.
So they discover where they are, and they send a security guard to stop them when they open up into the facility and get out of the elevator. The elevator scene is where we see all of the other monsters in the boxes.
Very cool scene.
It's a very cool scene. But so the security guard, the doors open, and Marty is with Dana, and basically they say, if you have clear shot, kill Marty. He just needs to die for the ritual. It doesn't matter if she dies. But they also do say that, like, if you can, and he's already dead and he's dead, you can also kill her. It's fine. They don't really care that much. But this is where my favorite line in the entire movie comes up. So the guard is trying to get Dana to move away from Marty, and then the zombie arm that has fallen into the elevator car like grabs the dude's foot, and he aims down to shoot at it, and then they like tackle him, and they're able to overpower him, and they shoot him, right, or something. Marty ends up
shoots himself. I can't remember exactly.
No, because Marty ends up with the gun. So I think Marty shoots him. And as the door is like closing, you hear Marty say, "Good job, zombie arm." And it's just so funny to me that he like
gonna take that moment to thank the zombie arm. Good work, good hustle out there.
And then this ends up leading into one of the coolest scenes in the movies, where all hell breaks loose. There's like an override button to purge.
They're basically just like, we can't fight all these guards. They have like basically a paramilitary force converging on them, so they just take their opportunity to hit this override button, which causes all these fucking elevators filled with monsters to,
horrific nightmare.
Open.
There's werewolves, there's like giant vampire bats.
There's like ghosts and witches.
A horde of zombies. A weird clown that just, is seemingly bulletproof and stabbing people.
Spiders and bats and everything.
Basically anything you can imagine. It just starts coming out of these things and just ripping these guards apart. It is insane.
It's literally a bloodbath, where like when we pull back from the scene, it's just this very like clinical, sterile, like hotel lobby elevator area that is just drenched floor to ceiling,
wall to wall blood and body parts and whatever. Like one of them, there's like a horde of zombies that comes like spilling out of the elevator, which is just funny to imagine there being that many in there. But
it's very like Looney Tunes in a way, where they're just obviously this whole thing is far-fetched and ridiculous, but a lot of it too is kind of hand waved, because they talk about how like they have all of these monsters as a result of like they're sort of like helped by these like gods that they're trying to sacrifice, because they're like, these things aren't the stuff of nightmares. This is the stuff that like nightmares are from, or like whatever.
Like that's a way to explain that basically this stuff is a result of the gods. This is like what covered the earth when the old gods were in charge, and we've been able to contain it by doing this sacrificial stuff.
Right.
But that's basically how the movie ends, is Marty and Dana end up into the big ritual room that we've been getting shots of every time somebody's killed.
And we get to meet the director, played by legend Sigourney Weaver.
Yes. Which is a great reveal.
Yeah, a fun little cameo.
You hear her voice earlier than you see her, and then you get to see her, and she, plays her part in the movie. The fun part about this is the director is actually successful, I think, or nearly successful, I should say, in convincing Dana to kill Marty.
Yeah. Because
they explain, because this has kind of been the piece of the puzzle that Marty and Dana have not been able to put together. Like, they don't really know why all this is happening.
They know the what, but they don't know the why.
And so the director explains, is like, the reason we do this is so that humanity doesn't end. And so it's terrible, but you need to die, to Marty specifically, in order for the world to be saved. And so Dana actually raises the gun to shoot him. Yep. And then Marty sees behind her a werewolf. And then she gets bit. And then Marty and the director get into a struggle.
They duke it out.
And the one of the
redneck torture zombies
comes in, and she ends up hitting the director in the head with an axe, and then Marty kicks them both over the edge. Yep. And they both go out smoking a joint. Yep.
And that's a fun exchange too that they have, where they're both just like sitting there, they're horribly injured, like they've now accepted, hey, the world is about to end, so they're having this final conversation together, and she's like, I'm sorry that I almost shot you. I probably wouldn't have really done it, but I am sorry. And he's like, sorry that I let a werewolf attack you and then ended the world.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, you know?
Yep.
And I do, one thing that I find fun about this movie, because I could also see it going like in a different way, is that they really don't leave anything up to the imagination. They don't make it ambiguous. They don't, you know, let you come to your own conclusions. Like, they eventually zoom out and you see this giant hand from an ancient god that's cracking through, you know, the ground and erupting over, and fire and, you know, all this stuff, implying that, like, yeah, this was real.
Yep.
And I could definitely see a version of this where it wasn't real.
Yeah, if they had just, like, you know, faded or cut to black as they're sitting there on the stairs in this ritual room before anything actually happened, and then you being like, okay, well, they're leaving it open for a sequel.
Right.
But this, in no way, shape, or form is open to interpretation for a sequel.
Which is why they haven't done one.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's really interesting, and I also kind of like that they toy a little bit with, like, the ethics and the morality of all of this, because obviously we're looking at this and we see this friend group as the victims here. They've been, as much as they want to say, oh, they're making their own choices and yada, 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 they're obviously being manipulated in a way where they're not making choices that they would normally make. So that's all just kind of lip service. So you can really look at the whole situation as a profoundly evil thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
But then there's also different points where the technicians are talking to each other and they're like, you realize what's at stake here, right? Like, we're not just doing this.
Yeah, this isn't just for, like, shits and
giggles.
giggles. Like, yeah, they're cold and detached and, like, making fun and making light of it and everything like that. Probably because they're so desensitized to it, because they've been doing it for
done this every
decades.
year.
And so you kind of have to be in order to be okay with doing this, right?
It's also, like, you know, as a person who has, obviously not in that kind of situation, but as a person who's worked in a field where you see, like, a lot of heavy stuff, you do get to a point where, like, you're gonna make jokes with your coworkers at work even though you just saw something terrible, you know, because we're human and we have to just, like, keep going, you know? So then you also kind of have this flip side of, like, wait, are they the good guys? And I'm like, and now, like, Marty and Dana suck.
And this is what I mean by earlier with the whole tunnel scene, right? It's like, normally you are just rooting for the victims of it to get away. You want them to get away from the horrible thing that's coming after them to kill them. But in this, like, while you're still rooting for that, they've already set up that the fate of humanity in the world is at stake. So then you catch yourself and you're like, well, what happens if they get away? Right. And the ritual doesn't work?
Like, I don't want them to die, but also I don't want everyone to die.
Exactly. And so then you find yourself in this situation. You're like, I don't know if rooting for this guy is the right thing to do. It's a very interesting thing that I think rarely is successfully pulled off in movies that try to put a premise up like that.
Right.
And I think they actually managed to do it.
It's a very weird version of the trolley problem.
Yes.
Because, I mean, like, if you think about it, you know, Marty was kind of pissed at Dana in that moment when she, like, pulls the gun on him.
Yeah. Because
he makes that comment about where the director says, you know, oh, Dana, you have to be strong. And Marty very bitterly says, you feeling strong, Dana?
Marty is such a badass character in this movie. It's so good.
But he's like, he's not about it. He's like, you're not gonna fucking shoot me. But when you think about it, it's like, okay, Marty gets killed, or Marty and everyone else on Earth gets killed. Mm-hmm. And, like, what's the right thing to do in that situation? And obviously, you know, they did what they did. I don't know that there is, like, a perfectly correct answer in a situation like that. And also, I think it would be fully fair to have a healthy dose of skepticism and think all this is a lie anyway. Sure. But it is a weird version of the trolley problem. Yep. Do we kill Marty, or does everybody die? Yep. You know?
Yeah, do I pull the lever?
Yeah. Or do nothing. Yep. You know?
Yeah, no, I think it's very interesting.
It's a very fun movie. I will say, for me, I don't find it to be a particularly scary movie.
No.
Other people might disagree. There are some moments where there's certainly some gore. There's definitely some blood. And
it's a bloodier, gorier movie than it is scary. Yeah. Now, if you find those things inherently scary, this is a pretty terrifying movie. Yeah. It's not that there's not jump scares. There's
a couple, yeah.
They're not, like... This movie, I think what makes a lot of, like, truly terrifying movies is the ability to set and maintain a level of tension and dread throughout the runtime, and then having those moments of release where we finally get that big payoff of something like that. This movie, while there is some dread and some tension when the redneck zombie torture family
there definitely is
shows up, it doesn't last so long that you feel like you're like waiting for that big release, so that when a jump scare does happen, by the nature of it, does catch you a little bit off guard. It's not so just like jolting that you're like kind of a thing.
No, to me it's more like I do think it does a good job of building tension, because there are those, there are chase scenes and there are scenes where people are fighting and you don't know who's going to win, but it kind of, to me, like in my experience of it, it feels more similar to how I'd feel watching like an action movie, where it's like it's accurate. Thrilling and exciting, and I'm engrossed and I'm intrigued and I want to see what's going to happen, but I'm not scared.
Yeah.
It
is very funny.
It's so funny.
It's very entertaining. Did you have a favorite scene in the movie or scariest moment?
Well, I mean, again, because I don't necessarily find it super scary, it's hard to come up with the scariest moment. I will say that for me, one of the most effective and surprising jump scares is actually Holden's death. Because
I was going to say that too.
Even though you get that little glimpse because we see the bloody handprint, so something's going to happen, but you don't know that's going to happen.
Right. You don't know that's going to happen. And also, they leave enough time that in between when that happens, when you see the handprint and when Holden gets killed, that you do kind of forget about it. Because, again, you see that handprint when they all get into the RV to go through the tunnel. Then there's the whole tunnel sequence where he's, Sitterson's trying to get to the electrical panel to blow it up. And
there's Kurt and his dirt bike.
So there's a whole death in between that payoff, and then it happens. So it truly does catch you off guard if you're not prepared for it. So I was going to say that scene as being kind of a standout moment. I think Jules's death is particularly brutal and gruesome.
Hers is probably the most brutal of the deaths, which I also think kind of makes sense with like her archetype. I mean, within the universe, like we're not the ones who are being like, she's the whore, like what her archetype is in the movie. And I think there is kind of this thing, because something that's interesting is as we get these little sneak peeks into other countries that are doing their own version of the ritual, it's clear that not every country has the same requirements because it's based off of your culture.
Well, so, I think a perfect example of that is the Japanese ritual that is being performed, right? It's happening in a young girls' school classroom. It's like an elementary school with a ghost, and and they have to like work together to like release her spirit. So it's a very different vibe from what we're doing. And I think having Jules's death be the most brutal makes sense in terms of what that archetype and what that trope is, because there's a long-standing history in horror of brutalizing women, especially like women that are being sexual in any way. That's been the trope, is that if you have sex in a horror movie, you're gonna die, and that's just how it is. So I think it makes sense. Yeah, and I think like some of the other deaths also kind of mirror some of the characteristics that they're trying to make the people display. So like Kurt dies because of this overly heightened sense of masculinity and like alpha male. I'm gonna jump it. I've done bigger gaps than this or whatever, and he slams into the thing. Holden dies literally while trying to logic and reason rationalize the situation to get out of it. So I think it's the only ones who don't fit into that are Marty and Dana. They don't die until literally the like last scene of the movie, and it's not really related to either of their character archetypes. So, but
yeah, I mean, it's interesting to see. I liked that as commentary, because I think one thing I think is kind of tough in horror. A lot of different horror movies have tried to explore this concept, but I think it doesn't always work super well. Is kind of this simultaneously making a horror movie for viewer entertainment, but also asking the viewer to question why they find it entertaining.
Yes.
And I think that's something that this movie kind of plays with a little bit, especially with the example of these people, you know, the men in the chair, the technicians,
Yes.
the people laughing and toasting while, you know, this woman is literally getting beaten with a bear trap
and chain.
flail. Yeah. Like I think it's kind of playing on that of like, why do you find this entertaining and what do you get out of this?
Yeah. I think it's similar to the discussion we had about X.
Yeah.
You know,
Definitely.
I just think this is a more successful.
And that's what I was going to say. I think they do it in like an interesting way where you really do feel, you feel the different sides, like you can understand the different perspectives, and you walk away feeling like there's not necessarily a real villain here, you know?
Yeah.
Except maybe the ancient evil gods.
The ancient evil gods are probably the real villain here.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, I don't particularly have like a scariest moment. If I had to pick one, it's going to be Holden's death, because it's very surprising when it pops up. Other than that, standout moment for me is when they are taking the bets and going around. I just really like some of the commentary and everything that's happening in there. Sitterson makes a comment at Hadley's expense about, you know, the Mer people, and he thinks it's a wasted bet.
You're right.
And it ends up, you know, not happening. And there's this whole running joke with this intern that works there.
Right.
And maintenance ends up being the one that wins the bet because they set up earlier that maintenance votes for the same thing
every time.
So
year. Eventually they'll be right.
And then the reveal being that they have voted every single year for the zombie torture family. And then this year they had to split it with the intern who also wanted to do that one. It's just a very funny, that whole thing is honestly, very funny to me.
Any scene in that room, in the control room, is a treat.
Yeah.
Like what good casting, good writing, good performances. It's just really fun.
Yeah. Let's rate this one.
Sure.
We have continued using our card scoring thing.
Yeah.
We're not going to get into the nitty gritty of it. Just suffice to say that I came up with a 7.9 for myself.
And my score using the criteria was an 8.4 out of 10. And
doing all that together gives us just over an 8 at an
8.1.
8.15 or whatever.
8.15, yeah.
Whatever.
So
we call that an 8.2. Let's round up.
8.2, we're rounding. So an 8.2 is the official Love at First Fright score for Cabin in the Woods. I think that's well earned.
I think that's great.
I think it's a great movie.
Yeah. It's fun. You can throw it on with friends, watch it more than once. It's just a highly enjoyable movie.
Yeah, absolutely. I also just wanted to put out one fun thing, because I meant to say this earlier and it was so hilarious to me when I was looking at the Wikipedia page for Cabin in the Woods. Because Joss Whedon is associated with the movie, one of the related articles at the bottom of my Wikipedia page was Joss Whedon's uncompleted projects. And I think it's so hilarious that there's a whole Wikipedia page for that. It didn't just direct you to Joss Whedon. It's its own page titled, Joss Whedon's unrealized projects. Oh. It is a whole Wikipedia page of its own, separate from his page, of just 3 decades of unrealized projects. So yeah, work on that.
3 decades, huh?
Yeah, 90s, 2000s, and 2010s.
That's a lot of things that didn't happen there, bud.
That didn't go through.
Anyway. Well, next time we are doing our first new release. We're going to be seeing Imaginary. I'm gonna give like a little before we see it thing. I don't think this is gonna be good.
I'm not walking into it thinking it's gonna be great either.
the concept I've gotten, or like that I'm kind of running with from my understanding of it, is that it's basically just child's play.
Yeah,
but
it's like a possessed
somehow
bear.
going to be worse than that.
Yeah.
So, look forward to that one.
Yeah.
If it's bad, we'll talk about that, and we'll look for the good stuff in there too.
Sure.
And if it's good, then we'll be pleasantly surprised. Yeah. Either way, it's sure to be a great episode, because it's going to be a new thing, and you're going to get to hear us talk about a new movie.
So if you
hot off the presses.
Want to see that movie before you listen to the podcast, be sure to hit the theaters, or I don't know if it's streaming too, but and we're going to try to do this. We have a couple other movies that we know of that are coming out this year that we want to try to cover as well. And, if you have any suggestions of new releases that you'd really like us to go over, definitely send them our way. We're not set in stone yet with our full schedule. So, but I'm excited to do something new.
Yeah, me too. I think we're also planning on, at some point, to see Late Night with the Devil.
Yes, that's one of the other ones that's coming up pretty soon. That one
looks good.
I don't even think that's going to be bad. I think that's going to be really good.
That one looks really good. And I think around Christmas, they're supposed to be doing that new Nosferatu.
Yeah, with Willem Dafoe.
Yeah. And I also think that'll be really good.
Yeah.
But I also just really like Willem Dafoe.
He could just do 90 minutes.
He did a movie. I can't remember what it's called. It might be like Inside, or
you're gonna have to give me more than that. I don't know.
It's basically,
is it the one where he does full frontal nudity?
I don't know about that, but
that's Antichrist.
Okay, it's not that. No, he's like the only character in the movie. It's just him. He's like I love it. He like breaks into like some high rise apartment thing, and then he gets like trapped in there, and he's like in there for a really, really long time.
What a treat!
So it's just him. I can't remember what it's called.
I love that weird little man.
But yeah. Anyway, I've wanted to see that one. I don't know. It was on that Cine 2 Nerdle Battles thing or whatever. It was one of those what everyone calls a kill shot movie, because it was like just him in it. So like if you could get him into the Willem Dafoe hole,
the Willem Dafoe,
if you will,
if I
may, for your consideration, the Willem Dafoe.
But we're gonna try to do some more like recent movies.
But with that, if you have recommendations for horror movies, we try to keep our feelers out there so we know what's coming up, but certain things just slip through or whatever. So, but if you know of something that you want us to see, whether it's new or old, send them in.
You can reach us at our email, which is firstfrightpod@gmail.com. You can also follow us on social media. We are at First Fright Pod on all the major platforms. We also have a Facebook page, which is our name, Love at First Fright. So definitely send it in, or just send us your thoughts. What do you think about Cabin in the Woods?
If you didn't like it, shut up. I'm kidding.
Full stop. Don't write your email and then delete it.
And then delete it. Never email angry.
Sleep on it. But I think that's all I had. Did you have any other things you wanted to share for today?
No, I think that's it. For me.
I think that's all I've got too.
Well then, as always, scare well and see you next time.
Goodbye.
You got spooky with that one.